Right, Chair, we are now live.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you, Kirsty, and welcome, members. It's really good to see everyone here. Now, Kirsty tried to embarrass me at the start to say, obviously, I've come from Place, and I used to say Placians and Place Scrutiny was the best scrutiny in Calderdale. But what I omitted to say was Strategy Scrutiny was the bestest scrutiny board in Calderdale. So that's the tagline now on, Kirsty. No, it's really great to be here, and I think we've got an exciting team, and it's going to be a really great year ahead of us. So, subs and apologies. Please.
Yes, Chair, I'm clerking tonight for
Diane?
you. Hello.
Yes. Hello, Diane.
Yes. Hello. We have Councillor Foster substituting for Councillor MK Swift, and we have Councillor Kingston substituting for Councillor Kearney.
Right.
So, of course, we have apologies for Councillor Kearney and Councillor Swift.
Welcome, Councillor Foster and Councillor Kingston. Good to know that we've selected the best subs for this scrutiny meeting. There we go. Interest. Do any members have any interests about anything that's on the agenda? No? Very good. Item number 3. We are live on YouTube. Please do not swear. The public are allowed. Item number 4, the minutes from the previous meeting. So, obviously, I cannot comment. I wasn't here, but the meeting on the 20th of July. Are there any comments from the board? No? Can we have a proposal that they're true and accurate record? Councillor Porritt, Councillor Barnes, are you happy to second? Perfect. All in favour? Yeah. Perfect. Okay then, item number 5. Corporate performance. So we should have Jez and Gail here. Jez and Gail, welcome.
Chair. Yeah.
Really great to see you. I think.
Hello.
Hello, Gail. A few comments first of all. This item it's more about the corporate performance side. I think it's fair to say more about how we actually about the data, how we actually monitor the performance of our teams and how we benchmark it against other local authorities. So we need to tailor our questions as such. I believe an email was sent out prior to the meeting, but Jez and Gail, they won't be able to answer about specifics of teams, but they can certainly answer about the general thrust of corporate performance. So Jez and Gail, we've all read the report. Is there anything additional, anything extra which you'd like to add?
Not necessarily. I suppose there were just a couple of points really that I just wanted to emphasise in terms of the report itself, about some of the measures, certainly on total crime. Total crime historically has been a bit of a blunt SKPI, and there is work ongoing with the police and regional colleagues in order to get a more fine-tuned set of performance measures around crime, which will appear in this 22-23 performance framework. And really Appendix C, which was just to sort of highlight the proposed approach about how we're going to bring performance and finance a little bit more collectively into sort of the MTFS work. And hopefully we should see, and we've already started that work with the budget challenge sessions, in terms of performance being one of the standing agenda items and heavily involved in that. You should see a bit more of a finance and a performance picture being sort of built into our performance framework. So those were really the sort of the two key points that I wanted to bring out, Chair. But other than that, like I said, I think the conclusion says, 60% of the SKPIs were in the top or second quartile. So overall, in terms of the challenges, both locally, nationally, internationally even, the council has performed in the last financial year on a more than reasonable footing. But that's not to say that we're ever complacent, and our SKPIs will always reflect the priorities of the council and the emerging threats and risks. So that's, I suppose that's all I want to add, Chair.
Yeah, super. Thank you very much, Gail. Are there any comments, any further comments on top of that?
Yeah, I think Jez has pointed out everything that you need to know if you've got any questions, really.
Perfect. In that case, thank you very much, Jez and Gail. Members, are there any questions? I prefer members, if possible, to use the raise the hand function. But if a member wants to just shout out now to get us started on questions. Councillor Porritt.
Oh, finally unmute. There we go. It's actually not so much a question as a comment. I've been sitting on this board for a little while now, and I really appreciate this time seeing the new benchmarking against not just our North of England neighbours, but the wider benchmarking. We've been asking for that, and I really appreciate you bringing that in, because it gives us that wider view of where we stand with similar authorities, not just those that are geographically adjacent to us. So yeah, really just appreciating how this data's coming together, and also it would be really good to see the more finely tuned police figures, because obviously crime, like you say, is a very broad description. So yeah, really just a comment at this stage. Thank you.
Perfect. That's a round of applause from Councillor Porritt. So Councillor Kingston.
Thank you. Excuse me, I've actually got COVID right now, so my voice isn't great. The main thing I picked up on was the housing delivery test, which is something I was already aware of, that we're underperforming on housing delivery test. And I just wondered, I don't know if it's relevant, these questions, to the purpose of this committee, but I wondered, have we identified what the main reason is for under delivery, and are we doing something about it?
I think, Jez, if I'm right in saying that would be probably best direct to a cabinet member, possibly. Yeah, Councillor Dacre, I know it's not your portfolio, but do you want to give us a flavour?
Well, no, you're right, it isn't my portfolio, and I haven't been around for all that long, and it's quite a historic problem that we've got. I mean, one of the really simple issues is that in a lot of our borough, particularly the Upper Valley, it's actually extremely difficult to build houses that aren't going to immediately flood or aren't up inaccessible lanes. So it's difficult to build them up there. I know the local plan is contentious, but one of the advantages of the garden villages that we are hoping to build, if the local plan is approved, is that they are large-scale, high-quality developments for which we are already getting interest from quality large developers. And one of the problems we've had in the past is that because of the nature of the land that's been available for housing, we haven't been able to attract some of those bigger players, and therefore the smaller builders that we're relying on simply have capacity issues, that there's a limit to what either they can or they want to do. And some of the sites that, as I say, have been available have been hard sites. Brownfield sites, for instance, are often very challenging. They're more expensive to develop, and a smaller developer in particular, it hasn't necessarily got the resources to tackle that sort of thing. So those are some of the background reasons, and some of the things in the future which we think might make a difference. I don't know if that helps at all.
No, it does. I know I threw you a bit of a hospital pass there, Councillor Dacre. Apologies, because I know it is in your portfolio. I would add that on place scrutiny, we did the review of the planning action plan, improvement plan, and that's therefore with officers now, and it's all in the process of looking at the planning department. So I'd add that as well. Councillor Sutherland.
Thank you, Chair. Whenever we get these reports, one of the things I find really beneficial is that we don't just try and look at what we're doing solely as a council. We try and take a bit of a place-based responsibility for the whole of Calderdale. So, you know, issues such as crime, youth unemployment, even to an extent the highways, are issues where the council doesn't have all the levers necessarily. It might have a role, it might have taken over all responsibility, but it doesn't have the power to necessarily make more people get university qualifications, even though it has a role. So I just wanted to pick up on that issue of the other sort of agencies and players that have a role in these performance statistics, Jez, and just to what extent that this is carried out and taken to other agencies for conversations about how we can work together. I mean, I'm thinking, take youth unemployment. We've got a good stat regionally, but there's still a long way to go nationally. Is this something that, you know, we find an open door to go and speak to, you know, Homes England, for example, on homes, or whoever it might be, to be able to say, look, this is our performance indicator, we need some work, you know, it's been flagged up. I'm guessing it might be a mixed picture, but if you'd elaborate on that, that'd be appreciated.
Yeah, do you want me to answer that now, Chair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, correct. Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, in terms of how we engage with other authorities, so you'll see in the right-hand column, we do benchmark and we look at the best in breed in terms of obviously other sit for local authorities. As part of the performance management team, a key responsibility is working with other agencies. So we have representation at a regional level in a number of forums with WICA and other health and public health, business intelligence, data intelligence boards as well. Our performance picture is purely transparent. It has been from day one. It's always published on DataWorks dynamic, and there's dynamic reporting. So as well as these reports telling us a picture of at a point in time for the year, some of our SKPIs, when they are updated, you know, it's there in real time. So we do have those conversations on a regular basis, and our information and our performance is out there for all to see, other professionals as well as obviously the members of the public. There's always more that we can do, but we're receptive to being scrutinised externally from a performance picture, or obviously within performance circles. So
is that okay, Councillor Sutherland?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I suppose just further to what I was saying, it's not just, when we're speaking to agencies about that shared responsibility we have on a lot of these topics, and just try and embed that, when we get a good performance, it might be something we should jointly celebrate. When there's more work to be done, it's something we need to jointly work on. That's what I was getting at, Chair, but thank you.
Yeah, I've noticed Councillor Dacre's hand has gone up at this stage. Is that in response to this question?
Yes, it was, if you don't mind. I know that Mike's put his hand up for another question. Yeah, it was just to say that one example of where the working together has worked really well, and where there's been a definite outreach from us to the NHS is in relation to the exception report on there about percentage of women smoking at time of delivery. And I think I might have mentioned this before, because that's a really good example where we went out and succeeded in getting the midwives to refer women who were smoking, and so that to get extra help, and it's really made a difference in bringing it down. So it was absolutely, although everybody in health and in the local authority would obviously want that to happen, it did require somebody to get a grip of it and to go and say, look, this is how we think you can help us. We can put the people in programs, we can give them the support, but we need you to be identifying those women and persuading them that they, there is an opportunity for them to participate in efforts to stop smoking. And that is showing really good signs. And I think that's, and yes, I know what you then said at the end, Councillor Sutherland, about celebrating it. And I don't know, what I don't know is how the other half of that equation is celebrating what is a really good result. But certainly from our point of view, it does show that getting out there and doing some really sort of quite detailed work, I suppose, or quite specific work with other parties and other agencies can really reap benefits.
Good, thank you very much. We're making good progress throughout this item. So I now move on to Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks for having me. I think it's the first time I've sat on strategy and performance, so it's quite an intriguing venture to join you for this evening. I'm just intrigued by the mention of the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement bid. Really, we're delighted to hear that we're getting more money to put in towards highway maintenance, because although it says only 5% of the network requires maintenance, or 4% during this reporting year, sometimes, depending on the routes you drive, it feels like slightly more than 4%. So, and certainly there are roads where I've put in repeated requests to have works done on those roads, and those have been, it's been, sort of, rather than the complete resurfacing that ideally would be required, it's pothole filling and so on instead. So I'd be really intrigued to know a little bit more about the sustainable transport settlement bid, and how that might apply to communities where there are issues with road surfaces that need addressing. Thank you. I hope that made sense.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's a really good question. It's possibly outside the scope of this report a little bit, because it's more of a public services question. If it's okay, Councillor Foster, it might be prudent. Mike, could we take a note of that question and forward it on to the relevant officer for a response? Is that okay? Yeah, it's just a bit, but I think it's a perfectly valid question, Councillor Foster. Councillor Barnes?
Thank you, Chair. It's nice to be name checked by Councillor Dacre, so thank you very much, Councillor Dacre, for that. I think a couple of things. One, I'm always a bit nervous about reports like this when I see dates, quite historic dates, in terms of the data capture, and I think that's just a point really, rather than a question. I think really what I want to know is how this document is used by officers, and particularly is that document then used by other scrutiny boards as a point for them to look at? Because if we look at, for example, the excess weight of 10 to 11-year-olds, which is in green but worsening, is that being flagged up with CYP? So how is this document being used internally by officers in order to focus attention on those are they then brought to the attention of the relative scrutiny department, or the relative scrutiny committee? Sorry.
That's a good question. Shall we go to Jez from like an internal perspective, and then maybe Mike for a scrutiny perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Internally, so the report is used, it's 4 times a year. Robin chairs a meeting of his corporate leadership team under an umbrella called, it used to be called TOG, the Transformation Overview Group. It's now got rearranged. It's focused around outcomes, performance, and finance. But so quarterly, so corporate leadership team, the agenda chaired by myself and Gail, and obviously with Robin. And so these SKPIs, so these performance measures, and I think there's a couple of things worth mentioning. These are, well, 19 or the 20 of the super key performance measures of like that, the dashboard that is the top end. Sitting beneath that are around about 80 or 90 what we would call other key performance measures, supporting measures. But these are the 20 what we would class as like herd indicators. They will give you the direction of travel that allow you then to drill down into much more detail that sits behind it. But going back to the question, yeah, 4 times a year, these reports are shared with corporate leadership team, and those corporate leadership teams, obviously, we would expect their directorate management teams will be made aware of these. In terms of the selection of the super key performance indicators and the supportive measures, the directorate management teams and the assistant directors and the directors are all involved in that process of identifying that, obviously in conjunction with our performance team. So there's quite a close and regular and scheduled awareness of the performance right across with the officer level. And like I say, it's always available on our DataWorks website for officers to use on their general day-to-day business. If they need to know what's going on a particular indicator, with the latest national release, that information is there. If our performance officers haven't already discussed that as part of sort of regular meetings that they might have with them on a monthly basis. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, Mike?
Just to say, Chair, I mean, it's always been a bit of a challenge, this item, to be honest, because when you read the performance reports that Jess and colleagues put together, they usually apply predominantly to the other scrutiny boards, but it's important, I think, to have one place that focuses in on performance. Whenever the reports go to Cabinet, certainly Bella, Lauren and myself always read them, and we use them to inform our discussions with the other chairs when we spot something that perhaps slightly surprises us, or we think that the other scrutiny boards ought to be aware of. And they also have performance information on a regular basis in some of their other reports. And the example of planning, I think, is a good one. CYP has always been a board that, since Stuart Smith was the director, has had regular performance data and performance reports and takes it very, very seriously.
Yeah, perfect. I'm going to move on to Councillor Whitaker because I'm just mindful of time. So I'll just move on to Councillor Whitaker.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question off the back of Councillor Foster's question about maintaining the roads. I suppose it would be remiss to ask why we're so poorly performing compared to some of our neighbours. We're 13th out of 16. Why is that, is the question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, from a data point of view, Jez, is there anything from a data perspective which would indicate, you know, why we are poorly performing? I know it's more of a service level question.
Yeah, it's like I say, I think the service could certainly provide, quite a lot of detail. I know the demography of the borough certainly doesn't assist, but we could, I think we can get a more comprehensive response back from Highways colleagues on that if needed, really.
Yeah, Mike, could you make a note of that question as well? Essentially the why as to the Highways. Quick question from me, therefore, to close things off. Obviously, this report, it's one side of the coin. Ultimately, it's about identifying issues. The next side is the action following the report. I think Councillor Barnes took the words right out of my mouth, really. But I'm not gonna say the next part of that lyric. But what are the processes and mechanisms, really? So you've identified things through this report. You've mentioned that you had a meeting with Robin. How does that then filter down to the teams? Where's the teeth coming from this?
I suppose the answer to that, Chair, is, like I said, the performance dashboard that's the discussion item. That's the agenda item. If there are areas of development or weakness, as well as celebrating obviously areas where we are performing well, but there is a task that if there is an area that is in need of some extra support, that corporate leadership team. So it's not chaired, like I say, it's Robin and obviously the corporate leadership team, so all directors. It stimulates a work or action if there's a particular indicator that is red or is going in the wrong direction, or that the trend is not going in the right direction. Then that is it. The aim of that is to stimulate those conversations with directors, with ADs, to see what further work can be done. We would then probably, almost certainly, bring an exception report to the next meeting in the format that's in the appendices, that basically highlights what the issue is, what action is being taken, and what can be done to improve. So that's probably the mechanism in order to identify improvement. Whether there needs to be something more robust than that, obviously, is we're more than receptive to any further ideas that Scrutiny may have.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Councillor Dacre, final comments?
Yeah, thanks. Just very quickly. So I think in roads, yes, as Jess said, if you look at the other some of those comparator authorities, they haven't got such challenging topography or weather as we do in the middle of the Pennines necessarily. And yeah, as Jez also mentioned at the beginning, the budget challenges meetings now do focus on the performance. So some of the same sorts of tables that you see in that summary report will come up in a directorate budget challenge and will be discussed. And it's then, of course, a lot of these indicators reflect what directorates are doing. It's in a way, it's not, do the directors need to tell their staff to do this, because the staff are already doing it. The staff are already trying to work with women smoking during pregnancy, for instance. So it's not that they need to be told to do it, it's that they need to know how well they're actually doing it. And then it's the director's obligation to make sure that if it's not going as well as it can be, then they've got that, it's their job to make sure that that is improved as much as possible. Thanks.
No, absolutely right. So I'll close this item then. In that case, thank you, Jez, and thank you, Gail, for coming. I think there's probably a further discussion with the board how we take this item in the future. Possibly, is it better maybe to do it over a written scrutiny? Is it possible in some ways to take aspects out for other reports so we can? It's more like an ancillary report, if you understand me. But I think we need to have those discussions as a board on how we do want this report in the future. But it definitely serves an important role. So thank you to Jez and thank you, Gail, as well.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda, we've got Sarah and the problem debt scrutiny review. Sarah, over to you.
Good evening, and thank you, Chair, for that introduction. So the report that's been presented to you is 6 months on from the scrutiny that you did around problem debt. And when we look at the position that we're in now with regards to cost of living, how very timely that scrutiny was, that gave you an opportunity to look at what the position was and with regard to Calderdale's response to problem debt at that time. Things have moved on significantly in terms of the situation that people find themselves in. This report gives you an overview of the work that's been done to try and respond to the recommendations that you made. So I've detailed all the recommendations in the covering sheet, and then we've got an appendix that has my response to each of those. Now, I don't know how you want me to do this, Councillor Robinson. Do you want me to read through them, or do we take it as read that everybody's already read them and just go straight to questions and use the time wisely like that? It's up to you.
Absolutely. Let's take it as read and let's go on to questions if that's okay with you, Sarah.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you.
Questions, members? Anything following on from this report? Councillor Barnes?
Yes, Chair. I think actually Sarah has hit part of the nail on the head. I think actually this was good work across all three parties when we brought this to council in the very cold Minster, I think it was. And I think maybe we actually decided to put it together to avoid it being even colder in there. But I think it is good work. I think the key thing for me from this is going to be the link into the cost of living work that we're doing. And I think in particular, I think an area of focus is going to be point 3, which is the council tax early intervention, because I think we're going to see an awful lot of pressure. And I think if the cost of living crisis is going to be as bad as it is being forecast, then what people are going to do is they're going to look at where they can cut costs or where they feel they don't have to make payment and it won't affect them or it will have minimal impact upon them. Always one of the arguments in business when you're working in a risk team is that what's your business? A business would stop paying its insurance because it could get away with not paying its insurance for a while and paying certain things. And I think council tax is one of them. So I think that's going to be a very important thing. But I think we need to make sure that we link this review, this report into what's coming into the cost of living review in the coming weeks. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, perfect. Shall we go straight on to Councillor Thornborough, I think?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. 2 questions really. It's on 3, recommendation 3. It's regarding the proactively contacting 250 vulnerable residents. But what's council doing also to contact other residents to sort of just state that there is help out there if needed. Also, further down, it's got about cost of living, and as you know, energy prices and everything else is going up. But a few years ago, the council were very proactive in trying to set up bulk buying with energy and other things. Is it worth investigating what benefit we can provide residents of Calderdale by going down that line as well towards bulk buying or group services with residents?
Shall I answer, Councillor Robinson? Yeah, so in terms of your first question with regard to the early intervention team for council tax, this is something that was set up following the scrutiny review, where it was identified that we have a number of residents who are really struggling with council tax, and what can we do to support them. I think it's fair to say, and you'll be able to see from the information that we provided, that the support that's been given has been very well received and has worked really well. However, we could scale that up 100 times and still not reach all of the residents who could do with that support. But we're a small team. We're working within the resources that we've got, and we're proving that way of working is effective, and we are encouraging people to keep making payments on their council tax. We work really closely with other local organisations who support people who are in debt. Noah's Ark in North Halifax, for example, and they are very keen on making sure that people understand the implications of not paying your council tax. But absolutely take on board what Councillor Barnes said, that as an authority, we need to think about what is within our gift to look at. We can't change the cost of energy. That's not within our gift. But what we can do is try and support people to reduce the cost of their energy. Council tax is something, again, which we have control over. Is that something we want to look at? Do we want to consider council tax reduction again? Do we want to consider what our recovery policies are? All of those are things that we as a council can consider. And I would hope that in the scrutiny around cost of living, that those are the kind of questions that will get asked, and officers will be asked to go away and look at that. In terms of the bulk buying of energy, I think was that the White Rose Energy Company, Councillor Thornburg, going back a few years. Yeah, I wasn't involved in it at the time, but I understand that there were some challenges with that. But it's certainly something that I can pick up again with our affordable warmth team through the regeneration service, and I'll make sure that we've got some response for you when we do the cost of living scrutiny.
Yeah. Fantastic. Councillor Sutherland.
Thank you, Chair. First, less a question than a comment, but I was really glad to see about the support that the two debt advice services have been getting in the area, and I really hope that they do get that funding through. It'd be great for Calderdale to be able to see that funding coming in from a national level, because we don't necessarily have much resource to spare, but I think it's a good way of working in partnership, and hopefully that gives us a solution there. I wanted to speak about recommendation 3 because I think this is a really important one, and I think it's about creating a culture and an environment and almost a brand where our residents feel comfortable coming and speaking to us as a council when these issues crop up, because the longer they're left, the more of a problem and a situation that people usually end up in. And I think that, perhaps for historic reasons, there are still some concerns out in communities about contacting the council, and the word that the council isn't going to be a sympathetic ear, and they're going to pursue you for your debts in the most aggressive way possible. And I think these two case studies really show that actually the council takes a very different approach, and there's an opportunity to help people here, even helping them tap into national funding and benefits that perhaps they weren't aware they were eligible for, and just really try to encourage people to come forward early. And I think it's really helpful that you've demonstrated the to an extent the sort of the costs and the money that's come into the council through that, to sort of demonstrate that whilst you've got a limited team, hopefully some of this work in the long run could actually be really quite beneficial in making sure that we support people and get council tax in as well. So I really hope we can see more of that and continue to build on that welcoming environment.
Thanks for that, Councillor Sutherland. That certainly would be something that I would want to continue with, and something that my contact centre team who are working on this find so rewarding. And the compliments that we get through from people who, as you say, have been very worried about contacting us and asking for help, have found that it is so helpful to them and has moved them on into a place where they're feeling much better about their financial situation. I think it's fair to say that the level of demand that we're already facing from people who are struggling is something that we're not able to manage. which is why we're spending a lot of time now working with partners to make sure that all the information that we've got about what support is available is shared amongst all our partners. We've shared a frontline workers briefing to anybody who works directly with our residents, so that if they come across anybody in whatever situation who is struggling financially, there's a full list of the financial support that's available, points to our website where all the up-to-date information is, because we need to make sure that this is a system effort, this is a borough-wide effort, and all our partners are involved in supporting people as well. This is not something that the council can solve itself.
Good. Councillor Parsons-Hulls.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's great to see this work happening and the things that are going on behind the scenes. Some of the things that I've been quite alarmed by is obviously the lack of housing, affordable housing, and how many people are actually applying for our social housing. I was quite shocked when when I discovered it was over 200 sometimes per property. You know, that's quite alarming. I've come across people, certainly in our ward anyway, where they've basically said, look, they've tried to go through the social housing door and it's not worked. So then they've gone to private landlords. Private landlords won't take the tenancies because of the DSS or whatever. Then they're just left like thinking, well, where do I go next? You know, what and I suppose because of COVID's changed the landscape of housing. So many people maybe who might have been private landlords in the past, is what we've noticed. A lot of people might have seen this, like on the Headland Bridge website as well. Obviously, doesn't affect my ward as much, but you know, there are some private landlords out there now who are probably doing more Airbnb. And I guess it's that sort of, how do we work with that private landlord cohort, shall we say, that group of people who could potentially help us to home people, you know, give people a home. Maybe less people are taking on the Airbnbs. So how do we work with private landlords? That's my question, basically.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Parsons-Hulls. Sarah, not sure if that's one that you can really answer.
It's incredibly challenging, the situation that we have with housing at the moment, and there are a number of reasons why demand is increasing and supply is reducing. Obviously, there's been an increase in house prices, which has meant that some of our landlords have decided to cash in on that and release the equity in the houses. There was also a change in tax relief, which meant that landlords were no longer able to offset their mortgage payments against any rental income that came in, which meant that for a lot of, because we have a lot of landlords in Calderdale who only own one or two houses. You know, private landlords don't often have lots of different houses. The cost of living crisis is impacting on them as well. So they're either looking to release some assets for themselves or look at increasing the cost of the rent. You'll know that the local housing allowance hasn't increased in a number of years, and therefore there's a big gap now between some of the rent that people are being asked to pay and the amount of benefit that they will get to cover that. People with debt, when there's such demand for housing, people who've got issues with debt will slip further down the list, because landlords will want to take people who are a more certain bet for them. When they've got a choice, they can do that. So there's lots of issues around housing. We are aware of that. I know Mike had one of, I can't remember, was it Place Scrutiny, who looked at private rented properties recently, and our housing team and Heidi Waters are really looking at that. So I think it's probably best if I ask Heidi to report back. I don't know if they're coming back on that scrutiny, Mike. I've lost track of it.
Yeah, and I think if we can get copied in, Mike, on that response, that'll be, you know, forward the report onto board members. That'll be appreciated.
Just to say that the comments that Councillor Parsons-Hulls made were absolutely consistent with the work last week of the Place Scrutiny Board on private respect, and also the comments that other members made about it's not a council problem, it's a partnership, it's a borough-wide issue. And just to say that Heidi Waters is in the process of appointing a liaison officer to work with private landlords, so bringing them closer into the into the planning.
Superb.
That's great news. Thank
Yeah.
you, Mike.
Fantastic. Councillor Porritt.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sarah, for this report. There's clearly a lot of really good work going on here, and obviously we've had people with problem debt for as long as debts existed, but I'm really conscious of how much worse this is going to get. And you've already touched on this, talking about the size of the team and how challenging it's been even to bring the work to this point. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you feel about the resilience of your teams and the potential for this work to be done at the scale that it needs to be done, with so many people facing financial challenges over the next 12 months.
We are producing a business case for Chris Forrester, our head of finance, because council tax sits within his area, as you're aware. But the front end support that is given is within my team. So what we wanted to do is we'll sort of beef up the information that we've put in this report to you that identifies this is how much it's costing us to do it. However, from a nuts and bolts financial perspective, this is how much money we've got in. But also I want to really make it clear that this is not just about collecting that money. This is about the impact that it's having on people's lives and making sure that we're supporting people and not really increasing the amount of stress that comes with being in debt and being chased for your debts and the recovery action that might take place. So whilst it's important to prove that financially it stacks up, it works, we are supporting people to make payments to the council who previously probably wouldn't. It's also about doing that at an early stage before they get into serious debt. So we're identifying people who've missed one or two payments and really getting in quickly with them to make sure that, and we talk to them about maximising their benefits, making sure that they're claiming everything that they're entitled to. We can offer with budgeting support and then setting up payment arrangements that are achievable for them. And fingers crossed, the business case will prove enticing to Chris Forrester and Councillor Dacre.
So just as a follow-up on that, obviously that's an element of the work that's outlined in the report, but obviously there's a lot wider work that's being done by various different departments within the council and different agencies outside of that in conjunction with the council, and really just thinking about how much of this can be progressed at the scale that it needs to be progressed at in terms of people's financial difficulties, whether that's something that is optimistically factored in, or whether that is something that you just appreciate possibly isn't going to be possible.
I think sadly, Councillor Porritt, it's the latter. The sort of escalation that we're seeing already in demand for advice and support around people not being able to pay their energy bills or struggling with food already, within my service areas and also within CAB and Noah's Ark and other organisations who are working with people in that position. We know that we're not going to be able to support everybody. So what we are doing is making sure that we've got all of the information about what people are entitled to and how to get it on our website. We're going to keep building on that. We've got some fantastic people working with us through our anti-poverty partnership and the various working group forums that we've set up. The local action groups that we're encouraging local ward councillors to set up in their communities will also help in making sure that we can get information directly into smaller areas and getting feedback to us on areas which we might not have thought about in terms of where people need support. So yes, we're not going to be able to provide support to everybody. In terms of so that from an advice and guidance perspective, we're not. So we need to make it as easy as possible for those who are able to be able to support themselves, for other frontline workers to be able to have that information at their fingertips so that they can provide that support, and it doesn't have to funnel into your usual suspects who would deal with this kind of work. So everybody's geared up and has a responsibility for providing that support. And then on top of that, in terms of what financial support we'll be able to offer to people, again, we're not going to be able to make sure that everybody can manage through this. Talks of an 80% increase on the energy cap in October, again, for people. It's just not going to be manageable, and we are going to have people who are very, very quickly sinking into significant debt. and it's what can we do to help people with the mental health impact that will have on them.
Yeah. We're moving on. I'm going to cut off questions. I'm going to allow people to ask questions who've already put a hand up, but I think that will be it after these questions, because I think we need to move on to the next item. Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Chair. This follows on really from what Councillor Parsons also was saying about the housing issues, and I just wanted to flag the incredible work the homeless prevention team are doing. Their caseloads have rocketed in the last year. I know that they're each dealing with caseloads of 50 plus active cases where people are being, at significant risk of homelessness each, and they are just, I mean, they're working incredibly hard, but they are putting their all into every single one of those families that are in dire straits. And they are really, I work with them quite closely through my day job. I get quite a lot of housing cases in for my work as a caseworker for Holly, and I work with the team on a regular basis, sort of phone calls back and forth and so on. They really do pull the stops out to do everything they possibly can. But one thing that was highlighted to me today was the fact that not only were private landlords selling to raise money because they need to, but they're also serving Section 28, saying that they're going to sell the house, kicking the current tenant out, and then marketing it again a few weeks later with a £200 to £300 increase on the rent. That's just unethical. No matter which way you look at it, it's just appalling, and it happens. And it's happening over and over again. One client that I've been working with for a long time has had that happen to her today. We know well her landlord isn't going to sell the house. He's not. He just isn't. He's got no intention of selling the house. He's just kicking her out so he can put the rent up. And it's a grim reality, but behaviour like that makes the situation far, far worse. But I just wanted to highlight the superb work that the homelessness prevention team are doing, because they are facing a situation where they're fighting a losing battle every single day. There just aren't enough houses to go around.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very, very rare that there's more than one 3-bed house, if there's any at all, on Key Choice. I mean, there's actually 4 this week, which is, I think it's the first. I was speaking to Chelsea earlier. She said it's the first time in the whole time she's worked for Calderdale there's been more than one 3-bed each in a week.
Thank you for that, Councillor Foster. I will certainly pass that on to the team, because they are, as you say, incredibly hardworking and incredibly committed. And yet they do feel it. They want to do a good job. They want to help people find houses, and when they can't, that impacts on them.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
I think there's another element.
Brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. There's another element to what Councillor Foster said then as well. It'd be interesting to get a legal opinion on that, because I know that a lot of people who have debt problems don't necessarily have access to the legal advice that they require. So it'd be quite interesting to get a legal perspective on that. I'm not sure if that's something that this board could facilitate, to see what legal provision is in place, but that could be quite interesting. Councillor Kingston.
Thank you. I just want to echo about the work that Customer First Housing are doing. That feedback, the compliments that were listed in there, it was just a joy to read those, and to think that I felt very proud of our team reading those compliments. Wonderful, excellent work being done there. I wondered about the Calderdale Credit Union. How much awareness is there of Calderdale Credit Union amongst people who might need those services, reflecting on this problem with loan sharks? And of course, that's credit unions are an excellent way of accessing money at very fair and reasonable lending rates. So I just wondered, how aware are people in Calderdale of Calderdale's credit union?
It's something that we've been talking about with the credit union just over the last few weeks, actually, Councillor Kingston. And I think one of the issues for the credit union is that unfortunately they are seen by a lot of people as a poor man's bank, and people shy away from using them because of that reason. So we're working with them to try and sort of not relaunch them, because they work really well, but make sure that we can get more information out to people, to encourage people who have got available money that they could put into savings that can then be used for loans for people who might be struggling, but also as a means of a different way of banking for those people who might be struggling. So yeah, that's a really good point. And we do want to make sure that where we've got a credit union within the town, that we make the very best use of it, because they are a real asset.
Absolutely. Councillor Thornbert?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Kingston stole my thunder regarding the question on the credit union, what assistance and they're actually giving residents, and what's my mind's gone blank, but what we're working with them as well. But there were one thing credit union started doing, this was going back 10 years ago, and it was a really good idea, assisting residents who needed their help with buying white goods, such as fridges and dishwashers and everything else, washing machines, because it did keep them away. And I think you were working in conjunction with the co-op at the time, and it assisted them buying certain goods at a reasonable rate, and they kept them out of going to the likes of Bright House, which, as we all know, charge extortionate, really high interest rates just to buy a certain item. So what work have we? I think you've answered what were you doing with the credit union, but is it something you could at least look at again regarding these white goods finance?
Absolutely. If that's not something that they've continued to do, because I'm not a credit union expert, but they've got loads and loads of different accounts that support people with different things. One of the things that we've been looking at particularly with them is a budgeting account that they run, so that you agree to paying so much money every month, and they will then make sure that your bills are paid for you. So it takes that stress and strain away from you. Obviously, there's going to be impacts there on the amount of money that people would need to put in every month, given the bills that are coming in now. But it may be, Councillor Thornbert, that they've still got that white goods support account. I'm not sure, but what I can do is ask them to provide me with a full list of what's available, and I'll make sure that we share that with the scrutiny board.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Sarah. So members and Sarah, thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah, for bringing this report over. Thank you for the updates. I think it's something that as a board we'll have a watchful eye over, especially in the coming months, but definitely over the next few years. So thank you very much, and we look forward to receiving the next updates in the future. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Right then, thank you very much. The next item number 7, financial review, revenue, sorry, not review. We don't have Chris, is it Lee?
Yeah, that's right, Chair, yes.
Welcome. Is there anything you wish to add to the report, or do you want to just crack on and get straight to questions?
Yeah, I'm happy to go straight to questions. Just explain that Chris is on leave this week, so I'm standing in for him. Chris has actually done a covering report which brings out the main points of the Cabinet report. So there's probably not a lot to add. So like suggest, we could go straight to questions.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Lee. Members, any questions? No. Councillor Thornbert?
No, it's a quick question. Sorry if it's regarding, school reserves and as you know, energy prices going up, and this winter, the amount of energy they will use, just heating the school. What assistance are we?
Rob, you sound like a robot. We can't really, not really, no. Can anyone else hear Councillor Thornburg?
Yeah.
No. Rob, can you type your question out in the
Just
chat?
bear
Is
with
that
me.
okay?
It'll take me about
Oh,
an hour
it's
to do
too
that.
long of a question then. Summarise.
Okay, now.
Try turn your camera off.
Right. Right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, give that a whirl.
Right, thank you. No, it's just regarding the school reserves. I've lost my page now, but being, sort of reduced by about £800,000. But what's the sort of arrangement regarding any assistance to do with raising higher energy prices, what they might probably will entail to eat the school over winter?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, obviously the school's reserves are within their power. It's not those aren't the class as part of the council's reserves, but they're not something we can use for general council expenditure. They are just for the schools. Like Sarah said before, the cost of living crisis having a terrible impact on residents. It's also having a massive impact on organisations, including the council. And I don't know if people have seen the review monitor that went to cabinet last month, sort of early August. That was showing quite a stark position, of our own finances, of an overspend potentially of £10 million, be reduced by some reserves that we have from COVID grant, which we're putting against it. On top of that, we've also got the pay rise that's coming in at around 6.6%. That's the latest pay offer. So, it's affected the council as well as everybody else. But obviously, other councils are looking towards government to see if there's any extra support that might come our way, when a new Prime Minister is put in place. But at the moment, the council is suffering as much as any other organisation and trying to battle the impact.
Perfect. Councillor Dacre?
Thanks. It was just to say that I think the difficulty with the school reserves, in terms of the question that Councillor Thornburg asks, is it's the same with council's reserves, is that generally speaking, they're supposed to be used for particular purposes, although they're not necessarily absolutely ring-fenced for that. But if the schools were to try and use those reserves, which are designed for other things, on energy, then they wouldn't have the money when they needed it for those other things that it was supposed to be for. So I think it's a bit of a red herring for schools, is that, I think, and they are exactly like the councils, really, that and everyone else, that we are all going to be looking to government to try to help people, because the government is the one who's really got the large quantities of money that's going to be able to help people out with these things and institutions out with these issues.
I think the other issue as well is reserves are one-off in nature, so once they are used, they've gone. So they're not something you can rely on, 2 or 3 years into the future, because they are a temporary fix. We don't know how long the cost of living crisis will go on. We don't know if energy prices will start coming down in the future. But that's another issue that schools and the council will have to contend with.
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much. Ask for members for other questions, but whilst I'm asking, a quick question from me. Paragraph, it's 4.8.1.10. It says the financial impact on waste management in the current year is £0.4 million. And this cost mainly caused by driver shortages, more domestic waste, etc. Could you just provide a bit more detail on what that line actually means? What's the in terms of waste management? What's that £0.4 million going towards?
It's a combination of things. One thing which is often overlooked is the push towards working from home. So people are creating more waste in the home, and the council has a statutory responsibility to dispose of that domestic waste. If they were going into a workplace, the workplace would have that responsibility, not the council. So that's part of the 0.4. There was something went to cabinet, which was to increase funding for drivers, for the waste contractor, because they were losing drivers to higher bidders effectively, because they are HGV drivers. So they were going to haulage companies who were paying, higher wages. So that's another part of the 0.4. But obviously, the contracts we have with the waste operator, those are governed by CPI inflation. So every time CPI goes up each year, our contract value prices go up as well. So it's a combination of all those things. Obviously, inflation is impacting more on 22-23, but it's a combination of those three things.
Yes, thanks, Lee. I think that inflation issue it is important for revenue, but it's also important for capital as well, capital projects especially. What I'm getting at with my question is, obviously, we regarding waste management, we contract out to Suez, for example, so that is essentially a set fee. Now, I appreciate the fee changes with inflation, but what else is, like, how is that essentially changing if it's contracted?
How is what? Sorry.
So obviously we pay the contractor. It's a set amount a year because it's contracted over a set number of years. We agreed the increase, which was in the budget for an increase of growth of 150k. So my question is, obviously the 0.4 million doesn't include that 150k. I don't understand how, when we contract out for a service, how there's going to be an overspend, unless, I'm guessing it royally wrong.
I think, that particular issue is more detail in the cabinet report, because I think, obviously, the contractor is under quite extreme financial stress as well because of what's happening with drivers and not being able to, have people to drive the wagons that would take away the bins. So I think there was a special agreement made with the council to help the contractor, so there wasn't a disruption to service for residents. I think that's basically. But to my knowledge, it was a cabinet report that went sometime this year to agree that.
Yeah, I'll have to do some. I think some digging on this one. I'm probably know, but I'm asking you, Lee. You're probably not really the correct person to ask. So I appreciate that one. Councillor Dacre.
Thanks. Yes, I think it's probably a bit unfair to expect Lee to answer any sort of detailed question in that. But I mean, anybody who has looked at the council report and took notice of what was going on with this will know that money that was the extra money for drivers was in effect passported through Suez for the drivers. So it wasn't given to Suez to do what they wanted with. It was given to them on condition that they paid their drivers more in order that Suez could keep hold of them and that we actually had some chance of keeping the collections going. And it is, I think it's extremely challenging as the Suez contract, both for them and for us, because it was entered into a number of years ago when conditions were completely different, when we hadn't got the working from home that Lee's mentioned, when we didn't have a pandemic, and when we didn't have inflation. And those things have had all sorts of complicated effects on the contract around things like how much money people get for the recycling that's collected and how much it costs to dispose of the residual waste. And it is simply to expect everybody to carry on with that contract in those very changed circumstances does make it extremely difficult for both sides, I think.
The reason for having an agreement is to lock in a price. That's the reason. And the reason why the council committed the 150k a year is because, fair enough, the contractors can't keep their drivers, so therefore we need to pay them more. I get that. But therefore, I don't understand, therefore, why there's an overspend in waste management when it should be a set price. That's the point I'm getting at here. Now, I don't know I just don't understand where the flexibility is coming from. Fair enough, the contract rate can increase with the interest rate. I appreciate that. And that's why the price could be inflated. But I don't understand, Councillor Dacre, why there's an overspend. And I might have to take this one offline to, move the meeting on. But Councillor Dacre.
Well, yes, I think you will, because I can't understand what you don't understand, because I think Lee explained it, and I think I've tried to explain it a bit more as to why there is additional money being spent that wasn't in the original contract. So I think if you're not happy with the answers you've had, it's not really something that this scrutiny panel should probably spend any more time on, because
well, I'll decide what we spend time on, Councillor Dacre.
I know.
So
But I think it's similar to the point that you made about in the performance report, that you can't expect Lee to be able to give you fine detail on some of the things that are in that report, because he doesn't work for those directorates and he will not necessarily have been personally involved in those. So I just think it's akin to that. And so I'm not sure that we'd get any further in this meeting.
I know. I'm just simply trying to. You started your statement by saying you don't understand what I understand. What I don't understand. I'm trying to make you understand what you don't understand. So that's what I'm trying to do here. It is a pertinent issue, because ultimately the point is, in a budget, we signed off the £150,000 through the budget democratic process. The point I'm trying to get is that if there's an overspend, which is not happening through budget, then therefore it's not being signed off by members, and that's a way of artificially increasing the price of the contracts. That's the point I'm getting at, and it's quite a valid point, and I think members will understand where I'm coming from. But no, as Councillor Dacre suggested, we'll move on. Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Chair. I think this is kind of indicative, really, of the state of everything. I'm referring to 4.8.1.9, the transport budget, which is scary, actually, because the children that this supports need that support. We can't not give it to them. But the numbers are increasing enormously, and there just isn't the budget to support them. So with a circle that cannot be squared, or a square that cannot be circled, whichever way you want to put it, what on earth do we do? I mean, it's a rhetorical question in a way, because there isn't an easy answer to this one. But I think it's something that needs further discussion on how we address this, because it's an overspend of 1.4 million is enormous on a budget of 2.7. It's nearly 50% overspend, and if that is showing a trend that is going to continue, how on earth do we address it?
Yeah, that might be more of a service level question, to be fair.
About a postcard, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. Lee, do you want to provide us your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just in the process of completing the MTFS, but it's something I'm going to bring out in that as budget pressure we need to address. It's very similar in other West Yorkshire councils. Other councils are having major pressures in exactly the same area, so it's not unique to Calderdale at all. But like you say, it's a budget pressure. We can't bury our heads in the sand. If this what is what it is, it's what it is. But unfortunately, the way the budget works is it's a closed system. So if some extra budget is put into that area, it has to come from somewhere else, or savings have to be made to fund it. So that's going to be something that members will have to look at, during the MTFS process and the upcoming budget process.
Yeah.
Just going back, Chair, to your point about the waste contract. I think in terms of of whether it's fixed or not. I think it's the prices that are fixed, obviously subject to inflation, but I think the volumes do vary. So if the volume goes up because of working from home, for example, you know, the cost will go up as well. So I think that could be maybe an answer to part of the question.
Yeah, that would make sense in terms of the variance, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Lee. Any other questions? Councillor Porritt.
Thank you, Chair. Again, it's probably more of a comment than a question. I'm actually pleasantly surprised that there's any underspends at all. And I think that's probably going to be the last time that I get to say that. As ever, there are so many moving parts, aren't there, with anything like this? And just looking at 12.3, we're looking at emerging inflationary pressures. There's major unknowns about the fair funding review. We don't know even who the Chancellor's going to be, never mind what the spending review might look like, or who the Prime Minister might be and what their priorities might be. And there's just so many uncertainties. And I mean, I'm sure it keeps you awake at night, Lee. It certainly keeps me awake at night, knowing even just like, how do we keep the lights on as a local authority? What is it going to cost to heat and light our buildings? I mean, I'm sure people in Caffham are going to be, you know, having cold sweats about it. I'm very glad we've got LED street lights just to sort of take the edge off. But this, you know, make no mistake, anybody, that the fact that we've got a balanced outcome at this point, the fact that it's the budget is looking reasonably balanced, I think is nothing short of a miracle. And I'm very concerned about how we cover our costs for the year ahead and possibly longer than that, just because inflation and not knowing, you know, never having a spending review that's more than a year, not being able to plan. It's just, you know, we keep looking at these figures, we keep looking at how to approach this, but you know, I take my hat off to you even attempting it, because it is under the most onerous circumstances that you're having to do this work. Thank you.
Yep. Councillor, do you want to respond to that, Lee?
No, just thank you for saying those kind words.
Yeah,
yes, it does keep me awake at night sometimes as well.
Councillor Barnes.
Sorry, Chairman, I think my internet is playing up. I think Councillor Porritt, I only heard half of Councillor Porritt, but I think she pretty much said what I was going to say. I think the problem with these reports is that it is impossible for the person who's presenting the report to have the detail that we need to go through and some of the points. And I think that was what Councillor Dacre and your tete-a-tete, shall we say, was about. And I think this also links to the first report. I think if we're going to have these generic reports, and I don't mean generic is probably the wrong word, where we're trying to investigate specifics, it's a bit unfair on the person presenting the report. So I think maybe we should be doing the same thing as we did on the first one, which is to have written questions or bring in the heads of the individuals who have the answers to those questions at future times.
I think that's a fair comment, Mike. Obviously a report like this instigates further questions, doesn't it, outside of the report ultimately. So yeah, no, completely appreciate that. Good. If there's no more questions, I'd like to thank Lee for coming. Thank you for presenting the reports. I was going to say have a safe journey home, but no. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye. Good. Item number 8, the work programme. Mike?
Thank you, Chair. I should have said at the beginning of the meeting that Lauren Lobley's on leave today. I'm sure she won't mind me telling you all that it's her 30th birthday today. So although she asked me for permission to take leave, I think if I'd refused it, I'd have been perhaps have even shorter hair than I have, Councillor Barnes. So the main thing to ask you to look at is the membership of the Working Party on the cost of living crisis. That has been the subject of considerable work by Lauren, actually, in talking to various people and discussing with nominations from different political groups and elsewhere. And I think she's done a great job in getting to a list of 6. So that's contained in the report, and is proposed to you a membership of Councillor Blagborough, Evans, Durans, Holdsworth, Kearney, and Lee. So that's for you to agree or otherwise, I suppose, this evening. I had a conversation with Councillor Robinson after his appointment as the chair of the Scrutiny Board about this piece of work last week. I think it was Councillor Robinson, and Councillor Robinson was keen that the lead member on this group should be a member of the Strategy and Performance Scrutiny Board, and the only actual member of the board put forward is Councillor Kearney. So with Councillor Robinson's approach, I've contacted Councillor Kearney, although he did point out he's a relatively new councillor. He's happy to take on that role if the board agreed. So that is the main thing that I wanted to say about the work programme.
Yeah. Are there any comments from members? No. Very good. Anything else, Mike?
I don't think so, Chair. Without Lauren here, you've definitely got the B team. But she didn't want me to raise anything else.
Yeah.
Could we not have had Bella instead, Mike?
Sorry, Chair. Can you move and have somebody move and second your membership for your board that Mike's just gone through?
Yeah, I'll happily second it. And does that need to be put to a vote, Diane?
Well, preferably yes, because you're setting up a membership of a
subgroup.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll second it in that case. All in favour? Yeah. And no one against. Good. So in that case, I think probably if there's any items which members want on the work programme, please do get in touch with us via email, and then we'll bring it to the next meeting. But without any further comment, we'll close the meeting. Perfect. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm afraid, Chair, you haven't done 11.5 minutes, but well, Chair.
Nearly.
Good
Perfect.
Good night, everyone.
See you later.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Oh.
We're both on mute.
Sorry. Yes, we survived.
All good.
Councillor Robinson moves it on quite quickly, doesn't he?
He does when he chooses to. Yeah, he doesn't always, but this tonight, I think he might do. I think he might.
Do you think he's got somewhere to be tonight? Because I have to say, I'm surprised we've done it this time.
Yeah,
I'm complaining.
No. It wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad.
Well, he gave him more chance to ask a question, didn't he? So yeah. All right. Well, I'll see you at the next one then, Mike.
When are you next on this? Just on this one? When are you next?
I could be on anything. It depends what's in and who's covering what. So I get to cover whatever's left.
Yeah. Well,
I think next week. I've got next week. So I'm doing health and wellbeing board next Thursday morning.
Yeah. Well, I'm at both of those.
Yeah, and I'm doing adults at tea time.
Yeah. I'm not there tomorrow.
No, I'm not doing tomorrow's. I'm not there tomorrow. Sophie's doing tomorrow's.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
See you later.
Bye.